The big story of the day, obviously, is that President Trump, the Trump administration, they have now moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. They unveiled this giant seal, this beautiful seal. Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner, they were both there. They both spoke. Benjamin Netanyahu spoke at this. President Trump did not attend, but he sent a message from abroad. Here's what it looked like when President Trump paid homage to the new embassy in Jerusalem.
Today, we officially opened the United States Embassy in Jerusalem. Congratulations. It's been a long time coming. Israel is a sovereign nation with the right, like every other sovereign nation, to determine its own capital. Yet for many years, we failed to acknowledge the obvious, the plain reality that Israel's capital is Jerusalem. And we extend a hand in friendship to Israel, the Palestinians, and to all of their neighbors. May there be peace. May God bless this embassy. May God bless all who serve there. And may God bless the United States of America.
Okay, Benjamin Netanyahu is the Prime Minister of Israel. He also spoke and was very grateful, obviously, to President Trump for making this move. Again, this had been approved by Congress as early as 1995. So for 23 years, okay, it has been the law of the land in the United States that the embassy was supposed to move to Jerusalem. Clinton chickened out, George W. Bush chickened out, Barack Obama chickened out, Donald Trump did not. And finally, the embassy was, in fact, moved to Jerusalem, which is just a recognition of simple facts. The only reason anyone cares about Jerusalem or has ever cared about Jerusalem is because the Jews cared about Jerusalem first. Here's Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, talking about it.
We have no better friends in the world. You stand for Israel and you stand for Jerusalem. Thank you. What a glorious day. Remember this moment. This is history. President Trump, by recognizing history, you have made history.
And that obviously is true. Look, it's an emotional moment for anyone who is Jewish, honestly, like anyone who cares about Judaism, anyone who's Christian and cares about the New Testament, anybody who cares about the history of Jerusalem. This should be an emotional, historic moment, because the reality is that the fulfillment of Jewish control over Jerusalem was achieved in 1967. The fulfillment of the creation or recreation of a Jewish state in Israel was fulfilled in 1948. But the recognition by the United States that this is the reality puts to bed this idiotic myth that somehow Jerusalem was not Jewish. Okay, there's an old Talmudic story about a bunch of rabbis who, in the aftermath of the destruction of the Second Temple, there are two temples in the history of Judaism. The first temple was destroyed in 587 BCE, and then it was rebuilt just a few decades later. And then the Second Temple was destroyed in 70 and has never been rebuilt. That was destroyed in 70 CE, 70 AD. There's a story from the Talmud about these rabbis who visited the site of the destruction of the temple. All these are very, very famous rabbis in Jewish law: Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Joshua, and Rabbi Akiva. And there's a story about them going up to Jerusalem right after the destruction of the Second Temple. And they reached Mount Scopus, and they tore their garments. And when they reached the Temple Mount, they saw a fox emerging from the place of the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh Kadoshim, the place where they used to have the Ark of the Covenant. And the other rabbis started weeping, and Rabbi Akiva started laughing. This is from the Talmud. And they said to him, "Why are you laughing?" He said, "Well, why are you weeping?" And they said to him, "Well, a place so holy that it is said to have the stranger that approaches it shall die, and now foxes traverse it. Why shouldn't we weep?" And he said to them, "Here's why I laugh. For it is written, I shall have bear witness for me, faithful witnesses, Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Jerobokiah." Now, what is the connection between Uriah and Zechariah? Zechariah was at the time of the first temple. Zechariah was at the time of the second temple. But the Torah makes Zechariah's prophecy dependent on Uriah's prophecy. With Uriah, it's written, "Therefore, because of you, Zion shall be plowed as a field." With Zechariah, it is written, "Old men and women shall yet sit in the streets of Jerusalem." As long as Uriah's prophecy has not been fulfilled, I fear that Zechariah's prophecy may not be fulfilled either. But now that Uriah's prophecy has been fulfilled, it is certain that Zechariah's prophecy will be fulfilled. In other words, there's a prophecy the temple would be destroyed. You can't have the prophecy of the temple being rebuilt until the temple has been destroyed. With these words, they replied to him, "Akiva, you have consoled us. Akiva, you have consoled us." One of the most famous stories in all of Talmudic lore. Because the center of Judaism has always been Jerusalem. The center of Judeo-Christian tradition, from where it sprang, has always been Jerusalem. According to the Bible, the first mention of Jerusalem actually comes in Genesis 14:18, when Abraham meets the king of Shalem. And then in Genesis 22:14, Abraham names the site of his near sacrifice of Isaac Yareh, and that those are the same place. You put those together, Yareh and Shalem is Yerushalayim, which means Jerusalem. This is the site of David's Tower. It's the site of Solomon's Temple. It's the city of Hezekiah's water tunnels. If you've never been to Israel, if you've never been to Jerusalem, it's just an amazing experience. You are walking the streets that existed for 1,000 years before Jesus was walking the earth. I mean, it's amazing. These are the streets that Jesus walked, if you're a Christian. And for a Jew, these are the streets that were trod by Solomon. Right? It's an unbelievable experience. Think of the oldest thing that you know of in the United States. The oldest thing that you know of in the United States is probably from about 1620. Okay, now go back 2,600 years. Okay, and you are talking about the stuff that you're finding in Israel. Jerusalem was the eternal Jewish dream. It is the eternal Jewish dream, the dream of a free nation living in a land promised by God. The same dream as we have in the United States is the dream of Israel. It was the dream of Bar Kokhba, who revolted against the Romans in 132 CE, 60 years after the destruction of the Second Temple, and actually used Roman coinage to mint his own. He took Roman coins. You can buy these online. It's really cool. Okay, he actually took Roman coins and he beat the Roman coins to get rid of the logo on the Roman coins. And then over it, he put the logo of the Jewish temple with the words, "For the freedom of Jerusalem." This is the dream of millions of Jews over thousands of years. Jews pray thrice daily, okay, 3 times a day. We pray for the restoration of Jerusalem. It was the dream of Mordechai Anilevich, who's the leader of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, who wrote at the end of his life, right before his murder by the Nazis, "The dream of my life has risen to become fact. Jewish armed resistance and revenge are facts. I've been a witness to the magnificent, heroic fighting of Jewish men in battle." Okay, I helped write the autobiography, the memoirs of a Holocaust survivor. This Holocaust survivor went through Auschwitz. He's actually Elie Wiesel's cousin. He went through Auschwitz, and he went through Theresienstadt. And after the war, he went to Israel. He actually had a visa to the United States. He turned down the visa to the United States to go to Israel. He walked off the boat. They handed him a gun. They sent him to the front lines of Latrun, which was one of the bloodiest battles in Israeli history. And he helped establish the state of Israel, doing behind-the-lines work. Okay, the fact that Israel even exists is a miracle. The fact that Jerusalem is in Israeli hands is a miracle. The fact that Jerusalem's an open city where you can worship as you choose is a miracle. Okay, that's only because the Jews are in charge of Jerusalem. President Trump's decision is not just a spiritually resonant one, it's a wise one politically. Because there was never going to be a deal between Israel and its enemies until we recognize some basic facts on the ground. Israel is not leaving Jerusalem. The Jews are not leaving Jerusalem. They never have. They never will. There's been continuous Jewish presence in Jerusalem literally since the inception of Jerusalem as a Jewish city in the book of Joshua. The notion that there was ever a time when Jews did not live in Jerusalem or when it was important for reasons that were non-Jewish to begin is idiotic. Okay, Islam only built the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount specifically for the same reason that they build mosques on top of other holy sites. They knew it was a Jewish holy site. They built a dome on top of it. Doesn't mean the dome should be destroyed, obviously, but it does mean that to pretend that Islam somehow predated Judaism in this area is historically ignorant and ridiculous. Judaism obviously is the foundation stone for Christianity as well. Anyone who loves history, anyone who loves the Judeo-Christian heritage of the West has to understand the importance of recognizing that heritage, and that begins with the word on the stones of Jerusalem. Okay, history exists and truth exists. Okay, when Jews sat and mourned and they said, "If I forget Jerusalem, may I forget my right hand? May my right hand forget its cunning?" Okay, they meant it. They meant it. If you've never been to Jerusalem, honestly, everybody should take a trip to Jerusalem. It's an amazing thing. Okay, Jerusalem has not been forgotten and it will not be forgotten. The Jews that were nearly wiped off the planet are now in control of the holiest site in Judaism. The tears have indeed turned to laughter. In the Talmud, it says eternity refers to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is eternal. The God who made it is eternal as well. And good for President Trump for recognizing a basic human truth. Good for President Trump for recognizing the fact that the Jews belong in Jerusalem and Jerusalem belongs to the Jews. To pretend anything else is historically ignorant. Now, the press are historically ignorant. Not only are they historically ignorant, it's hard not to call the press anti-Semitic in the way that they cover these stories. So at the same time, they're initiating the movement of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Hamas has initiated all of these riots, all of this violence on the border of Gaza. Now, Gaza is in complete control of Hamas. Okay, Gaza is run by Palestinians. It is not run by the Israelis. Israel has nothing to say except for border control about what happens in the Gaza Strip. It is a hellhole. It is a hellhole because Hamas is a terrorist group that cares a lot more about murdering Jews than it does about making the lives of its own citizens better. If anyone wanted peace in the Palestinian Authority or Hamas, it would happen immediately. If they just said, "Listen, we are now done with all the violence. We're finished. Now we want to build up our society. Let's open it up." Everything would be open tomorrow. That's not what's happening. If you've seen the headlines today, a lot of the headlines from the press are all about 41 Palestinians killed in clashes with Israel. Okay, Israel is not clashing with the Palestinians. What is happening is that Hamas is delegating. They are sending a bunch of terrorists to the border in an attempt to breach the border. It's pretty amazing. I'll show the proof of it to you in just 1 second, and I'll talk about some of the media coverage, which is just egregious of the embassy move. it's astonishing how bad the media coverage is, and it demonstrates where their heads are at. But first, on to the media coverage about the situation in Jerusalem. So quickly, before I talk about the media coverage in Jerusalem, there's a headline from the New York Times. The New York Times is egregiously anti-Israel. They've been egregiously anti-Israel as long as I have been alive, and probably longer. And there's an amazing headline. It says, from David Halbfinger. Okay, and he writes, Israel feels pride but senses peril as U.S. moves embassy. And they're talking about how it's really dangerous time for Israel, and people are really nervous about Israel. Okay, here's what it actually looks like in Israel. Okay, I need to show you this tape of what it looks like in Israel right now on Machane Yehuda. This is clip 9. Yeah, clearly people there are very torn about the situation in Israel on the 70th anniversary of its independence. Literally thousands of people cheering in the streets of Machane Yehuda. Machane Yehuda is the biggest marketplace in Jerusalem. It's this street that is completely filled. And look, that is so typical of Israel, right? You see Orthodox Jews, and then if you see in the background there, you see an Israeli flag mixed with a gay flag. Okay, Israel is a pretty diverse place, pretty amazing, diverse place. If you haven't visited, you really should. I keep saying that, but it really is true. I was married there. My wife is Israeli. Her family is Israeli. Last time we were there, actually, is about 10 years ago. Well, we're going to have to do a trip, I think. I think we're going to have to take a trip to Israel and bring some of my listeners along, because I think that would be just a blast. But the coverage of the situation in the Gaza Strip is totally incredible and totally biased against Israel. So here is the headline from the Washington Post. Okay, headline from the Washington Post. Israelis killed dozens of Palestinians in Gaza protesting U.S. embassy move to Jerusalem. Well, if you just read that headline, you might assume that Israelis are killing protesters about the U.S. embassy, that people are just protesting in the streets, they're a little upset, and Israel's going out there and slaughtering them en masse. That is not what is happening. What is happening is Hamas has sent 40,000 people to the border with Israel. They're attempting to walk across the border. They're sending kites that are on fire across the border in an attempt to start brush fires in Israel. They're throwing Molotov cocktails at soldiers. They're throwing rocks at soldiers. They're hiding behind women and children to do so because this is what Hamas does, because they're a terrorist group. So that Washington Post story is headlined, Israelis kill dozens of Palestinians in Gaza protesting U.S. embassy move to Jerusalem. This is in the article itself. While some said they would abide by official calls to keep the demonstrations peaceful, others talked about their enthusiasm to break into Israel and wreak havoc. We are excited to storm and get inside, said 23-year-old Mohammed Mansoura. When asked what he would do inside Israel, he said, whatever is possible, to kill, throw stones. Does that sound a lot like a bunch of peaceful protesters at the border? No, it doesn't. Because they aren't a bunch of peaceful protesters at the border. It's a bunch of people trying to invade wholesale locations along the fence. Is creating enormous, our sick, really from the embassy, and to provide exactly the sort of media coverage you saw all day today with the split screens of Israelis celebrating and Palestinians suffering. Oh, it's so rough for the Palestinians. It is rough for the Palestinians because they keep electing terrorist groups. When you keep electing the Palestinian Authority and Islamic Jihad and Hamas to positions of power, it turns out you're going to live in a hellhole. When you keep allowing your government to delegate terrorists to the border, it turns out that the people on the other side of that border may not be too happy with you. But again, the way the media cover this as though it is totally Israel's fault. Another element of this. Okay, so there was a lot of talk yesterday about clashes on the Temple Mount on Jerusalem Day. So Jerusalem Day is the day when Israel liberated Jerusalem from the rule of the Jordanians. It was, in fact, a liberation. It was a liberation because suddenly all of these sites were open to Jews and Christians and Muslims alike. Okay, the Temple Mount, however, it was handed over to the control of the Islamic Waqf. So that evil, horrible Israeli government, the Islamophobic Israeli government, handed over control of the holiest site in the history of Judaism to the Muslims. It is not Jews who are in control of the day-to-day on top of the on top of the Temple Mount. Instead, they handed it over to the control of the Islamic Waqf, which prevents Jews like me from going up on the Temple Mount and praying. I'm literally barred. If I were to go to Israel tomorrow, and if I were to walk up on the Temple Mount, I am barred from praying. If I took out a sitter, I can do it anywhere else in the world, literally anywhere else on the planet, except for Islamic countries, which would punish me for being Jewish. Anywhere in America, I could pull out a psalm book. Okay, that's what a Tehillim book is. And I would just pull it out and start praying. If I did that on the Temple Mount, I will be arrested. And that's exactly what happened yesterday. Okay, according to eyewitnesses, this is Ynet, Jews entered the holy site and they were singing. The Arabs were calling out Allahu Akbar. Police forces that arrived at the scene had to separate the warring sides and remove the Jews from the Temple Mount. I'm sorry, it's not a warring side for Jews to go up in the holiest site in Judaism and say thank you to God. But this is illegal in Israel. Okay, the Jerusalem police said several Jewish visitors broke the rules of conduct and created provocation. Okay, this is how sensitive Israel is to the concerns of the Islamic population living in Israel. They're so sensitive to those concerns that Jews are not allowed to pray on the Temple Mount for fear of provoking Muslims. Okay, this is actual like honestly, if this were done in Saudi Arabia, you'd call it anti-Semitic policy. The idea that Jews are not allowed to pray on a historically Jewish surface because it might tick off Muslims. But this has been the record of Muslims in the region, radical Muslims in the region, for quite a long time. This is why when anyone tries to draw moral equivalence between what Israel is doing in Jerusalem and what Israel is doing in Israel and what Hamas is doing in the Gaza Strip or what the Palestinian Authority are doing or what even the Islamic Waqf is doing, it's just insane. It's just insane and ridiculous. But again, none of this is designed to be objective media coverage. All of it is designed to pretend that Israel is the aggressor in a conflict in which Israel is clearly not the aggressor. Israel is clearly not the aggressor in this conflict. It never was the aggressor. Israel accepted the deal in 1947 from the UN. It was attacked by Arab states. Israel in 1956 was blockaded from the Suez Canal, and they won that war too. In 1967, there was a preemptive attack that was launched by Israel as all of its borders were about to be attacked by Islamic countries. In 1973, there was an attack on Yom Kippur, the most holy day in Judaism, and it came very near to wiping out the state of Israel. In 1982, Lebanon was using Hezbollah in order to strike at Israel. Israel has constantly been in defensive war since its inception, and the media keep covering it as though Israel is the aggressor, in the same way they cover America as though America is the aggressor, which shows that the leftism of the American media and the international media expands to its hatred for the state of Israel. They hate the state of Israel because Israel is an outpost of the West. They don't hate the West because the West backs Israel.